So I go back to my room, I get room service, I go to bed, I wake up the next morning, I go to the airport, I grab the Wall Street Journal, and when I picked it up, I realized it was his face on the front cover of the Wall Street Journal. And I was like, oh shit, what did I just do? Yeah, I think mentors are critically important to success in your life. And I think seeking out mentors, finding them, looking for them is critically important. I didn't go to college, so I don't have those experiences of learning that way. I was a pretty good sales guy when I was young. I worked in car sales for a little bit. I learned a lot of incredible lessons from that. My first sort of real job when my wife and I got married and we moved to Arizona was working for a company called Unishippers, and this was a third-party logistics company. My mentor at that company was actually a member from the private equity firm that bought our franchise. What I appreciate about Rick so much is that he was just honest with me. But I think one of the most important lessons was I never grew up around people that wore dress clothes. So here I am in a job where I'm supposed to have a tie, I'm supposed to be going out talking to people. And it was like, for me, I was like, well, what's the cheapest stuff I can buy? Like, what's on sale at JCPenney's? Like, I'm gonna put that on. Instead of just saying, hey, you look like a slob, you should dress better, I wouldn't have figured out what that meant. I would have been offended by it. Instead, he was like, look, let's just spend a couple $1,000s and let's just fix this guy. And that was really important to me, right? It was really important in understanding the way that I felt when I dressed that way, the way that people treated me when I dressed that way. I'm certain there's things he taught me, but it's the things that he told me I was doing wrong that I think were way more important. So many times, in life and in business, we don't want to be honest with people. We don't want to tell them the truth about what we think. And the reality is if it's constructive, that's not coming out of a position of dislike or anger or hatred or trying to put you down. It's actually the exact opposite. And it's just recognizing that. When somebody comments on something like that, you have to actually take it real serious and you have to say, okay, what is it about myself that I'm not seeing, that they're seeing, and could they be right? Having a worldview that's very static, it's a very limiting thing because you can't really think outside of that. You always think that you're in the right. And recognizing that you're not is really important. It's a great way to grow. I was mentored by a very well-known billionaire, and it came about in a really odd way. There was this idea that was pitched. I recognized that it was a great opportunity, but very quickly it got dismissed by the executives. And I sat down with the executive team and I said, why don't you want to do this at your 7,000 stores? And they said, the cost is too great. I'm like, what do you mean? Because it seemed really reasonable to me. And they said, you don't understand what costs are, do you? And I'm like, what do you mean? So they said, well, here at this company, we think about our people as a resource. And we know every person, every leader here knows their cost of labor per second for their locations. When you have thousands and thousands of stores, well, it only takes 5 minutes for people to do this. And I have hundreds of thousands of employees. That's millions of dollars that it just cost. And they said in this presentation that these guys gave, they said this will only take your employees 10 to 15 minutes a day. And we ran the math, and it'll cost us millions, tens of millions of dollars to implement their idea. So it isn't that we don't love the idea. The idea is great, the idea is solid, but it just costs too much. Well, fortunately, I had just done some consulting for one of their competitors on a project, and I had found out some information in that there was a correlation that they had not considered. So without breaking the confidence of them, I was able to actually say, have you guys ever considered this? And as soon as I said that, they were like, oh my God, this is a huge opportunity. This could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Yes. So they went back out, told these guys we're gonna do the deal. When I'm leaving that evening, I walk out the front door and there was an older gentleman that was with these two young guys that had pitched, and he was sort of sitting to the side. And he immediately came over and grabbed my arm and he said, I need to speak with you. And I said, okay. And he said, I saw what you did there. And he's like, but I saw how you turned them. And he said, I'd like to buy you dinner. Well, that's very nice of you, but I have an early flight. I'm exhausted from this whole day. I'm just gonna head back to my hotel. So I go back to my room, I get room service, I go to bed, I wake up the next morning, I go to the airport, I grab the Wall Street Journal, and when I picked it up, I realized it was his face on the front cover of the Wall Street Journal. And I was like, oh shit, what did I just do? So what had happened is he had sold a multi-billion-dollar organization earlier the day that he was there, and he didn't really want to celebrate the fact that I had just helped him in this deal. He wanted to celebrate the fact that he just made $1 billion in this transaction. So when I got off the plane, it was the worst plane ride of my life because I was just like, did I just screw this up? Did I literally just meet, the person that can change my life? So as soon as I walked in the door, of the house, I said to my wife, don't even talk to me, I have to make a phone call. Well, then I had to hurry up and buy a flight because I took that opportunity and I flew out there and I met with him. And we became really great friends. And for about 6 months, I was out there maybe every week, maybe every other week sometimes, primarily just to go to lunch with him. Sometimes I would literally get off the plane, fly out there, get there at 11, rent a car, drive to his office, go to lunch, get back in the car, drive back to the airport, fly back here. And there were so many things that I learned from him as a mentor. And many of them, I wonder if they were intentional, if he was teaching me intentionally, or some of it was just him waiting for me to observe some things. Many times if I would go and I would be there for half a day, he would have meetings. Like, how do you keep this all straight? Like, how do you have that much knowledge in your head? And he just laughed and he said, I don't. And I was like, what do you mean? And he taught me the 5 whys. And this is part of Japanese management, that you have to unpeel the onion. And he said, when these folks come to me, they tell me what their problem is. And then I'll say to them something like, well, that's very interesting. Now, why do you think that is? And he said, and they'll go on and on and on for another 5 minutes or so. And I'll go, fascinating. Why do you think that is? And he said, by the time I hit the 5th one, they'd talk themselves to the solution. And he said, all I do then is I roll back my chair and I cross my arms and I put my feet up on the desk and I just say, aha. And he said, and every time they jump up and they're like, this is the greatest thing ever. I can't believe you helped me so much. And they leave the office. And he said, I don't even know what they were talking about half the time. He said, I just follow the script, because most people know what the answer is. You just have to let them unpeel the onion themselves. So I think that's the real power of mentors. You're talking about somebody who has 30, 40, 50, 60 years experience. And you're allowing them to impart into you a nugget of wisdom that might have taken them 10 years to get that breakthrough.